truth, Satya, is the foundation stone of the universe. Quote, the worlds are built on truth, says Mahabharata. Men and civilizations stand or fall according to their attitude towards truth. An honest person is spontaneously admired by all right-thinking men. The Hindu scriptures, however, point out that a devotee whose ideal is truth should always exercise judgment and common sense before speaking. It is not enough merely to tell the truth. One's words should also be sweet, healing, and beneficial to others.
The Yoga Connection with Zorananda is a deep dive into the world of yoga, exploring the rich history of tradition, methodology, and practices both ancient and modern. Follow along as yoga is explored through solo episodes to guest interviews to understand its vast reach around the world.
Hello and welcome to the Yoga Connection. My name is Zorananda. Today we are diving into the second yama, Satya, which is truthfulness. I want to do a little bit of a recap from the last episode. We went into ahimsa, non-harm, so I kind of want to bridge these together in a way. So if you haven't listened to that first episode, please do. They kind of lead one into another. But you're here and welcome. So last week I didn't post an episode because this is my birthday and I was out hunting with my dad and my brother. So took a break for that weekend and I'm back here now to get into the next topic, Satya, truthfulness. And I'm going to be diving into the work of Gandhi and Yogananda, just like I did in the episode with ahimsa. And these first principles, especially ahimsa and Satya, are pretty straightforward on a surface level. It's something that we're taught when growing up as children from our parents. You know, two primary things like try not to be hurtful and try not to lie or tell the truth. But even though they're fundamental in our upbringing, they can be a couple of the hardest lessons in our life because when it revolves around self-control, being truthful and not hurting others can be quite challenging at times because we're at the whim of our emotions. We're at the whim of how we feel about some things. And so in certain situations when we're being treated poorly or we're developing behaviors and personality traits that lean into lying and hurting as being okay, we will justify those actions. And so we need to be able to catch ourselves at particular moments where we can think whether or not lying or hurting another person is really truly justified and if that's a course of action that we should take. But because most situations that we put ourselves in when it comes to hurting others or lying, that we have to make that decision on a whim. And if we've built up the tendency to either be avoidant or to be abusive, that we're going to make that decision really quickly. We're not going to give ourselves the time to even think about, well, you know, like if I do hurt this person, if I am physically abusive or verbally abusive, you know, what's the consequence going to be? Because your emotional state is overriding your reasoning to even consider consequences. And for the most part, we set aside whether or not there really truly will be a consequence because in the moment, we want to make sure we get what we want out of the situation. So if it means hurting the other person and we kind of win the situation, then whether there's a consequence or not just isn't even bothersome. And then, inevitably there's some kind of consequence down the road. And so when it comes to lying, there's and more of an emphasis on delaying consequence and kind of building up the lie, right? Because once you get into a pattern of lying, you have to maintain that lie. You have to continue on with the story around it. I remember reading and looking into the study around the development of white matter in the brain and the difference between someone who's a pathological liar and someone who is not. And the pathological liar has this particular level of white matter in their brain where there are these connections that enable them to generate a story on the fly. And so when you're a normal person, you don't really lie. That if you have to lie, there will be telltale signs that you're not telling the truth and that the story just doesn't make sense because you don't have the ability on the fly to generate a story from beginning to end that will make sense and convince the other person. So pathological liars, they have this connection in their brain, literally and physically, that enables them to tell a story that makes sense because it links the kind of the falsity of the story in their mind with the perception that the person has that they're telling the lie to. And so there's a bridge that's made. So when they tell the lie, it makes sense to the other person. And that's the goal of the pathological liar, right? They want to make sure that if they're going to get what they want in that moment, that their story has to make sense and it has to ring true for the other person. And so then the person doesn't get the time to put up a guard to think about if the other person is lying or not. And so these are all traits that are developed throughout your life, right? And this is why we're taught when we're kids to not lie and tell the truth. But there's this irony around it that even though our parents will tell us not to lie, how many times do our parents lie to us? How many times do our parents say one thing but mean another? And yet they'll tell us that they're doing it to protect us. So there's this contradiction within our society and within our upbringing that even though there's a moral principle being espoused to us that we should tell the truth, that those same people are always lying to us. And it can be as simple as lying to us about the tooth fairy or the Easter bunny or Santa Claus, or even then to more psychological manipulation that just happens. Like it's a part of our human condition that we're going to go through some certain lessons. And especially when it comes down to child rearing, that when your child asks you about something particular, so say if it's like, oh, why couldn't you buy me that bike? Or why couldn't you buy me this toy? Or why can't we go to Disneyland? Or why can't we do this? Or why can't we do that? As a parent, you're not going to just like outright tell your 6-year-old or your 8-year-old or your 10-year-old, like, oh yeah, we can't do that because we're poor and we don't have money and we can't afford it. And, the parent doesn't want to crush the spirit of the child. So the parent goes, oh, we can't do that right now because of this or this, or, like, oh, don't worry about the toy. Like, we can't get it for you right now because you need to earn it or whatever, right? Like the parent is just going to tell a little bit of a lie or a little bit of a fib just so that the child can feel good. And there's this comedy skit by Louis C.K. about this, about how lying is just so good. It's so easy. Like you can tell the truth to the person and potentially crush them, like especially if it's no longer about kids and it's about adults. It's like, yeah, sure, you can tell the person the truth and potentially end the friendship or crush the person or whatever, but it's just so easy to lie. It just totally sidesteps so much drama. And obviously, he's telling it from the point of view of a comedian, so it's going to be so much more hilarious. But there's this point where there's almost a taboo necessity of lying in our culture. And so then when we are met with the concept of Satya and as a spiritual principle, that's like, no, don't lie. Tell the truth and be truthful. So my question is there any wiggle room in this? Does this just mean if you're going to become a yogi and you're going to teach yoga and then you come up to Satya and you're like, oh shit, I have to tell the truth all the time now. I can't lie. I think it goes into a gray area. I don't think it's so black and white anymore. I don't think it's, no, you cannot lie. Yes, you always have to tell the truth because lying is bad and telling the truth is good. But we don't live in that world. We live in a complex world where telling the truth in a particular situation, just like in Louis C.K.'s skit, like you can potentially hurt someone. And so I remember reading this book a long time ago by the Dalai Lama, 10 Ways to Live a Meaningful Life. And he has this chapter about being selfishly wise. And it's about this Buddhist concept of using a fib or a white lie with the intention of protecting. So in this case, where if you know something, say, for example, your best friend is cheating on on their partner, right? So your best friend, you find out and you're like, oh shit, like I know this truth, like what do I do? Do you go to the girlfriend or the boyfriend and you go, hey, like you're being cheated on? That's becomes a moral dilemma, right? Because first of all, why would it be your responsibility? And second of all, this is supposed to be your best friend. And so what do you do in that situation, right? Do you go and tell the girlfriend or the boyfriend and say, hey, you're being cheated on and I know this because A, B, and C? Or do you go to your best friend and you go, hey, you're cheating on your partner, I know this, And so the selfishly wise part of like, how do you uphold the truth, but in a way that's not going to be harmful and where it involves possibly a white lie? So say if like that friend comes to you and is like, shit, don't tell so-and-so, right? So now you're faced with a situation where your best friend is coming to you, they know, and they're saying to you, hey, I know I did this, but you can't tell my partner. What do you say in that situation? Because now you're faced with that moral dilemma again. Do you say, yeah, man, don't worry, I'm not going to tell? And then you uphold that and you're telling the truth and you don't tell the other person, and you just watch this relationship become more and more toxic. And if that wasn't your best friend and that's just some random person, say if it's like kind of a friend and acquaintance, like you're not going to have that much of a weight of guilt of knowing this stuff. You're just gonna be like, whatever, like I'm just not going to talk to this person anymore. I don't like this. But it's your best friend. It's someone that you've known all your life and this is happening, right? And so if there's a flip where your friend comes up to you and is like, hey, I know, please don't tell so-and-so. And you go, yeah, sure, but you're lying. you know that you should tell the other person. So this is where the concept of Satya becomes much more complicated, that it's not just so cut and dry. You just always have to tell the truth, right? So say if you like flip and you're that person and you are the one doing the cheating, and there's a whole other level of lying that has to take place, because now you have to hide the fact that you're cheating. You have to come back to your partner and you have to come up with some story. If they're like, hey, what were you up to? And you have to think on the fly, like, oh, I was doing this or I was doing that, but you weren't. You were with another person behind their back, right? And this is like the way of thinking of like the pathological liar, like I was talking about earlier, where you have to be able to think of stories on the fly that make sense to that person, especially if it's your partner, especially if it's someone that you've been with for years and they know you in and out. They know where you go. They know who you hang out with. They know your parents. They know everything about you. They know where you work out. They know where you work. They know absolutely everything. And so if you're not on it and you don't have that white matter connectivity, that whole story is going to crumble, and it's inevitable, right? Like, you have to be a special kind of sociopath to keep up with all those lies and to maintain that relationship. Just think about like relationships back in like the 50s and 60s and 70s, where you hear stories of guys who have like 2 families. Like, it's so ridiculous to me whenever I'm watching like a drama documentary or something, or it's on some dude that was caught being a fraudster, and then it comes out that he like had 2 whole families and he was going back and forth, and it's like, what, how do you even like, how do you have the energy for that? You know, it just like a little side rant, like I think like it gets me to think about the whole polyamory communities. And I'm like, man, when I look at the whole totality of my life of working a full-time job, having a podcast, releasing music, teaching yoga part-time, doing CrossFit, exercising, and just then I'm like, okay, well, I'm out in the world dating and I'm like trying to get a girlfriend, and I'm like, how do I even then conceptualize not only having one girlfriend, but like 2 or 3 on top of everything? And like that stresses me out. And then to think like, I'm not only am I going to get a girlfriend, I'm going to have a family, then I'm going to go get another girlfriend and I'm going to have a whole other family, and they don't know about each other. And I'm like, man, these dudes were on a next level of fucking psychopathy or something, man. Like, it's just so wild. And so looking at what it takes to maintain a lie is so energetically draining, right? And it weighs on you. And I guarantee you can ask anybody who are at this level of when they were basically outed as pathological liars, that when they came to and they began to change their life, I guarantee that they would admit, like, man, it's exhausting. Like, it's exhausting having to remember. Like, people are going to catch wind of that shit, and they're going to start to put the pieces together. They're going to be like, well, you know, like 4 weeks ago you said this, and then 2 weeks ago you said that, and then yesterday you said this, and then now today, like, they're going to be able to recount the things a little bit more clearly, because there's less of like an emotional charge in the moment of coming up with the lie, that with the pathological liar, if they're kind of running out of steam, that they're not going to really remember the far back lies, because in the moment they're like, oh my God, like if I don't say this, like I'm going to get caught, and like I can't do that because then I'm going to lose everything, right? And that's usually what it comes down to, is there's this fear of loss, and there's this like grasping, and it's really cool that that idea of grasping leads into a whole other yama coming up, right? Aparigraha, which is non-grasping. And so if we were to make a bridge here just between ahimsa and satya, is that truthfulness upholds non-harm, because you have the foresight that the lies that you're telling or would tell would lead to harm inevitably and eventually. And so the truthfulness is that you're avoiding harm. And so they kind of work hand in hand. And then we can look at like this selfishly wise, where there are going to be times where you can tell a white lie that is going to protect the person. So this is what we do with children, right? We tell little white lies to protect them because we don't want them growing up into a world thinking that it's a brutal place to live in, right? Especially if we live in a society like in the West where things are generally pretty calm. Like your day to day is the same every day. It's not like we are living in the Middle East, or we're living in like favelas in Brazil or in somewhere in Africa. It's like to be in a world where you can wake up in your bed, you can go to work, you can go to your favorite restaurants, and you live this pretty mundane, normal life unscathed by tragedy and torment, right, of just third world living. That when we bring kids into that world, we don't want to expose them to the brutality of life outside of this. And so we're going to tell them little white lies to help protect them. And because they're inquisitive, by the time they're like 6 and 8 years old, you know, they're starting to learn things in school, especially now that we have social media. They're going to see a lot of things on the internet. They're just going to catch wind of things, and they're going to ask you hard questions. And at that point, we can't help ourselves but to be able to tell them the truth, but then to package it in a way where it's going to be a little bit blunted. It's not going to be like this sharp, like shock of, you know, like, oh yeah, in the Middle East, they just behead people. And, you know, like you don't want to tell your kid that. So if they're going to be like, well, hey, like, what's it like, why is there so much, whatever in Iraq, right? Say if it's like a 10-year-old kid, and you want to be able to package the information. So you want to be selfishly wise in the sense that like you're selfish in that you want to ensure that there's a particular stream of information coming out. So you're kind of selfish about it. You're kind of like hoarding information. You're like, well, you know, they have a tough life because of blah, blah, blah. And so as now a concept that becomes a practice, right? So if we're actually looking at Satya as something that you're upholding. So looking through the lens of yoga and the yoga practice. And now you ask yourself, okay, how can I be truthful in what I do in a way where it's upholding ahimsa and it's not harming people, and I can pretty much avoid lying? And if I have to lie, it's to still maintain ahimsa. And so then I can be selfishly wise about it, or wisely selfish, and I can tell a little white lie. It prevents any harm. It doesn't harm the other person. And even if the other person were to know that you lied, they would think, oh, okay, that's actually not that bad because you were trying to protect me, and it's understanding. It's a little bit different if like the whole like best friend cheating thing. If the other partner found out like, hey, you knew this the whole time and you weren't even going to tell me, like, you know, you're protecting this asshole, even though like they're supposed to be your best friend, but they've been cheating on me for 8 months and you knew this. Like that's a little bit different, because then the truth then comes out as hurtful, and you withholding that truth now causes this tension between the people. But if it's a white lie where it actually helps protect the other person, then the other person will have more of a reason to be understanding than not. And so yeah, let's get into some things that Gandhi and Yogananda say, because I find that their interpretations of these concepts are pretty good, and especially Gandhi went like pretty deep into ahimsa and truthfulness. So I'm just finding a page where, in his autobiography, where he talked about this stuff, page 309. Yeah, the tricky thing with his autobiography is that he'll have parts of the chapter that are just kind of like information based, and then some of it is him telling stories. Yeah, so I don't want there to be too much dead air here, so just stick with me for a second. In the meantime, I can say that in my journey of teaching yoga and being a yogi, ahimsa and Satya played pretty significant roles, in the sense that they've really helped me understand just what it means to be okay regarding being a human, and that even though we have all this information within the yoga world to kind of teach us to transcend our humanity and to transcend spiritually, that that you can't really fully avoid being a human. And so there's going to be mistakes. There's going to be situations where, you do cause some harm, or you do, you don't uphold truthfulness to the fullest extent. And to have your own compassion for yourself, and to have your own empathy for yourself, and to consider that's okay, and that you're on this journey for a reason, and it's to learn these things. It's not about being perfect, and that if like a situation comes up and you tell a little bit of a lie, that it's not going to be the end of the world. And how often do we tell lies to each other anyways? Like, how many times do we come up to each other and we're like, oh, how's it going? And we're like, oh yeah, it's great. Lie. How many times do we, like, especially that, right? Like, oh yeah, I'm doing good, or I'm doing great, it's all good. But then in your mind, you're like, oh no, I had such a shit day. But we don't want to burden each other. We don't want to just have these crazy in-depth conversations just on the middle of a street, or in a grocery store aisle, or wherever, where we're having to explain to the person, like, no, I'm having a really shit day, and because of this and this and this. It's like, we just say, oh yeah, how are you doing? Oh yeah, I'm doing good, to generalize, because there is this inherent guilt around suddenly having to, like, trauma dump onto the other person. Like, oh yeah, this happened. And I know for me and my personality, I just don't have that in me to do that. I'm not the type of person where if someone's going to come up to me randomly and be like, oh, how's it going? I'm going to tap into the good things that are happening in my life. And I'm like, yeah, things are pretty good. Like, work's going well, and I have all these things happening. And, maybe I'll make a joke about, like, yep, still looking for a girlfriend or whatever. Right. But I'm not necessarily going to outright say, oh yeah, like, my life sucks right now. I'm super stressed. Like, nothing is going the way that I planned, and I'm really trying hard to get my music out there, and it's like pulling teeth, and like I've been going on dates and nothing's ever panning out. Like, who wants to hear that, right? And I think there are some people who lean into that because they want the pity and they want people feeling bad for them, and they want to tell a story of like, oh, woe me, right? But for the most part, to have the balance between when it's appropriate to tell the truth about something and when it's appropriate to kind of have a little bit of a white lie are kind of in those moments, right? Because say if you're at a party and in the party there's a space in a room where it's a little bit more quiet and you're hanging out with a friend that you haven't seen for a little bit, and it's a friend that you trust, and they're like, hey, like I just noticed that, like you're here at the party, but you seem kind of checked out, right? And there can be a moment where there's more of an invite to open up. And so in that moment of like, yeah, like, how are you doing? That you can feel a little bit more vulnerable, and you can say, you know what? This is happening in my life, and this is happening, and I don't know how to deal with this and that. And then to be able to unveil that truth, there's more merit in it. And we need to be able to pick and choose appropriately when to do those things, right? And I think that's the value of understanding like what it means to be human. And so we can have a spiritual practice that advises us like, okay, you need to be truthful. Okay, but what does that really mean? What is truth? Is it a universal thing, or is it a subjective thing? And it weighs on the balance of there are universal truths and there are subjective truths. There are truths that you believe in and you uphold, and they kind of pave the way for how you live your life. And so when we look at the concept of Satya and being truthful, we have to take that into consideration, that it's not necessarily meaning that it's a spoken thing. It's not necessarily just speaking the truth all the time. And that truth is a way of life and a way of living, and that you live your truth. And that ties into something like dharma and karma, of living your purpose and living out the actions of your purpose. Because there's now a whole new branch of what Satya means in that, of like, are you a type of person that's just like quote unquote NPC, non-player character person, where you wake up, you brush your teeth, you go to the bathroom, you have your breakfast, you go to work, you come home, and that's just your life, right? And so there's this whole movement on the internet and social media of like quitting your job, living your dream, making $30,000 a month, being a content creator, and like getting out of the system. And so there's this kind of hovering idea that doing what you're doing right now in your life is not living your truth, and it's not living your purpose. And I used to think that when I first started teaching yoga, I was like, you know what? I think my purpose is full-time doing this, like I need to get out of what I'm doing and get into this world of like doing retreats and doing teacher trainings and teaching full-time. But then there's this thread of influence that you don't see, that what I call like karma, the karma of your life and the action of your life, that there's an influence on what direction you go that you don't really have control of, and will never have control of. And it's something that's set up in the programming of your DNA and who you are as a person, that is going to direct what kind of decisions are made, even though there is this false illusion that you are in control of that decision making. And this starts to get a little bit complex, but so then the truth of your life and what your purpose is not for anybody outside of you to tell you what it is. So if you're on social media and you come across this post of someone being like, you need to quit your day job, that's not what you're supposed to be doing, you're supposed to be doing this and this and this and this and this and this, that is utter bullshit. Because what you're doing in your life and where you are and why you're doing it is your purpose. If you're working at McDonald's, if you're working at Home Depot, if you're a landscaper, if you're a plumber, if you're working in a bank, if you are in finance, if you're a butcher, if wherever, whatever you're doing, that is your purpose. You're there. That is your purpose. You've made decisions that led to this point and where you are right now, and what you're doing and why you're doing it is exactly your purpose. It's exactly your dharma. It's exactly your karma. It's exactly where you need to be. Now, how you level up and how you evolve is now a new set of decision-making skills. And so there's always a choice. You can either stay in where you are, and that's perfectly fine. To have anyone tell you that you need to quit your job suddenly and you need to do all this, like, they don't understand what your life is. They don't understand your situation. So it's really easy for some content creator who quit their job and are doing this full time to then tell other people to do it, because that's their business model. That's their brand. They're wanting you to quit your job to join them so that you can be under their wing and guidance, and so that they can make money off of you. That's really the simple truth of that situation. And so if you become wise to that and you're like, you know what? I'm at the job that I'm at because this is really the only job I can get right now. And it pays my bills, it pays my rent. I have an apartment that I can live in. I can eat food. It pays for my things. And yeah, maybe at the end of my check, I don't have extra money, but I have all these things that keep me alive. And so then right then and there, you have a choice. Okay, I can just keep doing this and live this life, and this is just the life that I live. And it's super simple, and it's super basic, and there's not much to it. And millions of people live this way, where they just have their day job, and they live a simple life. They play video games. They go out with their friends on the weekend. They go see a movie, and that's it. And you can't fault people for living that way. And so the next level of thinking is now a point of becoming self-aware of why you're a human. Because either you just kind of maintain this NPC living and you don't really think about like who you are as a person. You're just pretty content with like, I like these brands and I like this food and I like this thing. And that's really just as far as you go as thinking. But the introduction of self-awareness introduces questions like, who am I? Why am I here? Why am I a human? Why am I doing the things that I'm doing? Why am I at the job that I'm at? How did I get here? That is a trigger into now starting to understand what your life purpose is. And again, no one outside of you can tell you individually exactly what your life purpose is. And so whether or not you get into yoga or into any other religion or whatever material starts to pop up for you to go, ooh, that's interesting. And you start reading books and articles and you're watching videos and you're starting to get a new stream of information other than just like the typical mundane mainstream, like what celebrities are doing and like all the Star Wars movies and Marvel movies and toys and video games. It's like, all of that now is starting to be viewed as a distraction. And so now Satya as a practice, you're like, oh, now I'm starting to see the truth of what effect this stuff has had on me in keeping me where I'm at, keeping me from wanting to actually start to do something that is more creative. And so something typically triggers this self-awareness. Either it's like you take a psychedelic, you're with a bunch of friends, and someone brings mushrooms or acid, and you're like, you know what? Like, yeah, I'm going to try this. Like, I've never done this before. Like, this is crazy. Like, I wonder what's going to happen. And it just cracks you open. And the next day you're like, oh man, I need to change some things. Or sometimes it's a traumatic event. Like you go through a near-death experience and you come out the other side and you're like, man, I need to really reconsider how I'm living my life because I can't do this anymore. And there's a bit of a peeking through the curtains and the veil of like all the patterns that have been set up in your life. And you get to break through that for a moment and go, oh, I need to make new patterns. I need to actually like clear out all this old clutter of beliefs and ways of thinking. I need to start actually considering new ideas and new things. And so Satya then plays this key role of like, okay, now you're getting a glimpse of who you are and who you can be and the truth of that. And what does that lead to? What happens next? And so for me, it was getting into music more and playing guitar and being more creative. And then with getting into yoga and meditating and starting to understand that there are these parts of my existence that I play out. It's a part of my character development. And so I more so advocate on the side of keep your day job, use that as a way to take care of your just main bills, your rent, your utility bills, your phone bill, your food. Then on the side, develop other parts of your character. What other things do you want to be good at? What other things do you want to showcase to the world eventually? Is it art? Is it music? Is it poetry? Is it a sport? Is it yoga? Is it skateboarding? Is it whatever it is that the limiting belief of, well, I don't have time for that stuff because I'm always working and I'm always exhausted. That always exhausted part, there's a lie in there. There's a little bit of a lie in there that you're telling yourself that you can't carve out time for something else because, oh, I get home from work and I'm exhausted. The lie in that is self-sabotage, because if you were to actually be honest with yourself and go, you know what? I think I'm exhausted because I'm not healthy. That is a big truth. That comes out and slaps you in the face, and a lot of people are avoiding actually looking at their own health and to see like, oh, maybe it's not my work that's making me exhausted. Maybe it's because I eat a lot of fast food. Maybe it's because I don't exercise. Maybe it's because when I get home, I just sit down on the couch and I watch TV or play video games for 4 to 5 hours before going to bed. And so now the truth of your situation starts to unveil time management. It's like, okay, what time do you start work? We're all kind of varied all over the place. Some people start work at 10, at 9, at 8, at 7, and so when you look at your day and you go, okay, well, I have potentially this amount of time in the morning to do something, potentially this amount of time after work to do something, and potentially this amount of time on the weekends to do something. So for example, for me, I wake up in the morning and that's when I do my yoga practice. And it's not too complex. I'm not like the type of person that wakes up and does like 2 hours of yoga every day. I do maybe like 15, 20 minutes, go to work and come home from work. Then when I come home from work, it depends on the day and what it is, right? So if it's on Mondays, I either have a men's group meeting, or if I have that evening off, then I'm making content, or I'm practicing guitar, or I'm preparing for podcast stuff, right? And then Tuesday, I teach yoga. So I, again, wake up, do my yoga practice, go to work, come home, teach 2 classes, 2 yoga classes, come home and relax. Wednesday, same thing, but Wednesday night, there's an open mic. I go and I play music, open mic. Thursday, another potential day for a men's group. And Friday, I teach yoga in the evenings. Saturday, wake up, teach yoga in the morning. Then Saturday is like my whole rest of the days for music stuff. I'm putting together music videos. I'm doing editing. And so like I'm releasing a song when next Thursday a song's coming out. So today I have a lot of work to do in doing all my music stuff because I didn't do it on Saturday. I met up instead. I taught yoga, met up with my music producer. We set up the launch for the single, and then had dinner with my sister and her boyfriend. And so I set my life up so that there's flexibility, but there's still a schedule. And this is all on the back of those moments years ago when I had that experience of self-awareness in my truth of like, oh, this is what I want to do. But I'm not in a position where I can just quit my job. And so when I hear that from people on the internet, I dig into some of them a little bit, and I usually find out that they had a lot of seed money. So when someone tells you like, oh, you just need to quit your job and like you should just start this now and like you'll be making $10,000 to $20,000 a month in no time. Bullshit. Those people usually don't tell you is that they worked some high paying job before, that they were making $100,000 to $200,000 a year. And what they did is that they could save thousands of dollars a month, and that they spent 2 to 5 years saving money, planning for the moment that they quit their job and they do this thing full time. Because then now they're sitting on potentially tens and thousands and potentially close to $100,000 in seed money where they can go, okay, I can not work for a year. I can sell all my stuff. I can live really minimally. Now I have $100,000 in the bank. I can fully invest in this. I can be making content 8 hours a day. And that's how they do it. And they don't even tell you these things. And that's why a lot of these people are just like outright lying to your face. And this is a great thing about having a practice like Satya, is that you can see this when you start to really practice yoga in a way where it's not just on your mat, that it's like more of a psychological thing, that you start to really understand the inner workings of the yamas and the yamas, and you're looking at Satya and in your life and like really being truthful, is that you smell the lies a mile away and you're just like, no way. There's no way that this person just suddenly quit their job and they've been making $10,000 to $20,000 to $30,000 a month within 5 weeks. It's like, man, there's something else at play. And it's usually that they spent 2 to 5 years in the back end preparing for it, and they don't want to tell you that. And the only time they'll tell you that is when you buy their masterclass package and you spend $1,000 to $2,000 and they go in it, and then they finally tell you, oh yeah, in order for me to do this, this is what I had to do. I was working at a bank, or I was in finance, and I was making 6+ figures, and I hated my job, and I didn't want to do this, and so I decided to save, and and it's like, but you're going to be talking to people that make minimum wage. And so how fair is that? Like, you're telling some guy that's making $16 an hour, and you're like, oh yeah, just quit your job. And he's like, but if I quit my job, I lose everything within 2 weeks. Like, there's no way. And like, how do you expect someone like that to even work and save money? Like, especially in the economy that we have right now, like everything is super expensive. So you're telling someone even working and making $20 an hour or even $22 an hour to be like, oh yeah, save $1,000 a month. It's like, they're going to be like, no, fuck you. There's no way. There's no way. And so that's the truth of that. And, when I look at my life and I look at how I want to encourage people to live a fulfilling life, I model it based off of what I'm doing. I don't model it based off of what I think I should be doing or what I pretend that I'm doing. Like, I have this little bit of cognitive dissonance sometimes, and kind of what's the term? This like cognitive dissonance that people see what I'm doing and they're like, "Oh my God, it's so amazing! You have a podcast. Like, you're making music, you're teaching yoga, you have this job." And I'm like, but then I know the truth of the situation. I know how much money I'm making. I know how many views I'm getting. I know like the interactions, and I'm like, yeah, but like it sounds good when I say it, but like I'm not at a high caliber. I'm still at the very beginning of things, and I make sure to tell people that I'm like, yeah, I have a podcast, but I'm super irregular with it. Like, I'm trying my best now to put out one episode a week, where there are podcasters that put out like 3 to 4, or they're putting out one a week, but they have like 5 podcasts. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not at that high caliber of output or even input in viewership, but people are impressed that it's happening, right? So when I tell people like, yeah, like I have a full-time job at this place, and I also I'm teaching yoga part-time, and then I have my podcast and my music, and they're like, oh my God, like that's amazing. How do you do all that? And I've gone to a point where I say, I just take it one day at a time. And I don't beat myself up if I don't meet deadlines, because I don't have anyone hovering above me to try to make these things go out. And that's the beauty of it, of just like doing it on my own, that, you know, if I go hunting for a weekend and I don't put an episode out, I don't have executives that are like, hey man, like we have advertisers. Like, you can't just skip an episode. You need to be doing this. Like I don't have that. And even with my music producer, we're super chill. Like, we were supposed to release this song that we like finally set up to release back in September. And even he was like, yeah, man, there's no rush. Like, we have things to figure out, right? And so that's the way that I like to live my life. And I feel like this whole episode has just been kind of a rant, but I couldn't really find anything in Gandhi's autobiography. There's like there's just like stories that he talks about with the truthfulness stuff. And I was trying to look for something really specific about the definition of Satya, but I didn't really want to like read through stuff that he was going through. But Yogananda is way better at writing out more like philosophical stuff about these. So this is in the Bhagavad Gita, the Royal Science of God Realization. God talks with Arjuna. So this is his kind of like transliteration of the Bhagavad Gita. And it's my favorite. Like, I've read like 2 or 3 other ones, and I found his wording and his writing, it's like, it's so poetic, and it's so deep. He's really a high intellectual when it comes to this stuff. So it's like, it's pleasant to read, and it's not so like fluffy, I find. So he says, truth, Satya, is the foundation stone of the universe. Quote, the worlds are built on truth, says Mahabharata. Men and civilizations stand or fall according to their attitude towards truth. An honest person is spontaneously admired by all right-thinking men. The Hindu scriptures, however, point out that a devotee whose ideal is truth should always exercise judgment and common sense before speaking. It is not enough merely to tell the truth. One's words should also be sweet, healing, and beneficial to others. Hurtful statements, however accurate, are usually better left unsaid. Many a heart has been broken, and many a life wrecked by truth spoken by words inopportunely. A sage carefully watches his speech, lest he wound those who are not yet ready to hear and profit by his veracious observations. The Vedas mention 3 kinds of truth. All values pertaining to man and nature are relative truths. These influence human beings during the waking state, which is essentially changeful, ever in flux. All values pertaining to man's ordinary dreams and sleep, when he is in touch with the subconscious mind that conjures images in the form of astral phenomena, are imaginary truths. These have a certain validity, but only in their own restricted realm, which is far more fleeting, vague, and ambitious than in the world of matter that men perceives in the waking state. So I'll read a little bit more here. During deep, dreamless sleep and in the samadhi meditation of the yogi, man abides in his true nature, the soul, and cognizes absolute truth. It is a mistake to think that ordinary persons are never in communion with God or the ultimate truth. If all men did not occasionally pass into the state of deep, dreamless sleep, even if for only a period of minutes, they could not live at all. The average person has no conscious recollection of his soul experiences, but as part of the universal whole, from time to time he must replenish his being from the source of light, love, and truth. By honoring the principle of truth in his thoughts, speech, and actions, a devotee puts himself in tune with creation and with the Creator. To a greater or lesser extent, all persons who meet such a saint are uplifted by his harmonious vibrations. The true man of God is freed from the painful dualities and contradictions of reality and is fit at last to enter the final refuge of absolute truth. So like I said way earlier, the pursuit of the yoga practice and the adherence to a principle like Satya leads to what Yogananda just said, that there is this trajectory that is built upon where we are taking step by step to transcend our humanity. But that's not so easy because we're up against inherent and latent patterning, not only in this life, not only in the actions that we've taken, not only the words that we've spoken and the thoughts that we've had, but also within our genetics from our parents and our great-grandparents and so on and so on and so on, just generations and generations of patterns within our genetics that leads us to this moment now where we are always at a crossroads. Do we adhere to our genetics and do we adhere to the patterns that have been set by us and in this body that is so old? Like, even though this is a new body in the sense that this body will never be again, it is also very ancient in that it's built upon bodies that have already been in existence. And so, though this is a new body, it is also a very old body. And so, all the things that are in it that is now expressing itself through its genetic coding, that we always are at a split between, do we continue on this genetic journey and we just maintain the patterns, or do we make new patterns? And the thing is, we're always making new patterns. The brain cannot help itself but to continue make new neurological connections. But we rub up against the old patterns, and the old patterns are the ones that are influencing the new patterns. So that seems very confusing, but in the sense of taking on a new practice of Satya, of being truthful, and in the case of Yogananda, that there's like these 3 realms of truthfulness, right? And that striving towards a more spiritualized sense of truth is what is going to open us up to the wisdom of understanding the value of truth and what it can do to the people around us, what it does to yourself, what it does to your family, what it does to society. And like he was saying, that truth you want to be inherently sweet and pleasant, and that it's not harsh and foreboding. Because when you begin to justify to yourself, well, I just have to tell them the harsh truth. I just have to tell them, like, they need to hear that. They need to hear that. In my mind, that's really no different in the energy of telling a lie. Telling a lie that's going to eventually hurt someone is the same energy of telling a truth that hurts someone. Wouldn't it be? Because that hurt that's coming from a psychological and emotional pain, why would that be any different from the psychological and emotional pain from telling someone a truth that is hurtful? And so to be able to look at the situation and assess it and be like, okay, well, I want to tell the truth here, but I want to do it in a way that they can accept the truth for what it is, and it's not going to be hurtful. And I can then back up the truth with compassion and empathy so that they feel good about hearing it. And that, to me, is the path and the trajectory to opening yourself up to this like spiritual divinity within us. And that the DNA within us plays a part in actually almost figuratively, metaphorically opening up to receive that divine guidance. That rather than being bound up in its patterns and being closed off to any newness of spiritual awakening or self-awareness, that you just circulate through the patterns of your genetics and how your mom did things, how your dad did things, how your grandparents did things, and great-grandparents, and so on and so on and so on and so on and so on, that finally there's this marker and this placement here and now that goes, I totally appreciate my ancestry and that it came to this point that I'm alive now. But this is what I'm going to do instead. I'm going to make a new pattern. I'm going to set up so that in my genetics, there's new coding. There's a new way of thinking. There's a new way of being. And that's really what I think, at least, this whole Satya thing is about. It's about how you, in this moment, make a significant shift and change so that in your genetics, there are these new markers that get created and that they uphold a new pattern. And so that maybe you won't be able to express it perfectly, but when you have kids, they're going to actually be set up with new genetic coding that can uphold the truthfulness and uphold ahimsa and uphold Satya in a greater light than you could. And that's kind of how it is always with everything. It's like we always want to strive to not be like our parents. We see it. We are like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be like that. And so if I'm going to have kids, I'm going to treat my kids differently, and so that they don't grow up the way that I grew up, and that I can actually be relieved that, yes, I love my parents and I love my family, but here's what I do different. Here's where I set things up, where I can be so much more aware as a person and as a parent or whatever, right? As a friend, that I can treat people differently. I can treat myself differently. I can look at my health differently. I can look at my behaviors differently. So we're at time, hit the hour mark. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. I hope this was helpful. I hope you can draw some insight. This one was more of a free flow. I usually type out what the outline is going to be, but I didn't really have time to do that today. Funny talking about time management, but hey, just trying to be truthful, just trying to be honest. Check me out on social media. Yogi Zorananda is my yoga page. Zorananda.music is my music page on Instagram. Check out my website, zorananda.com. I just revamped it. I got rid of a lot of stuff. I got rid of all my future life progression and meditations and stuff, and I'm just focusing on music right now. So my new website is going to have all my music stuff. I'm in the process, or will be in the process, of creating a Shopify so that I can start getting some merch and start making sales on that. Because I'm kind of shifting from promoting my book that I wrote a few years ago and my yoga stuff to just my music stuff. Because when it comes to yoga right now, I'm teaching part-time already. So I'm like, okay, well, I already got that taken care of. I don't really need to, like promote myself too much on social media. I think music is the one that's taking up more of a focal point on my social media stuff, at least in the next 6 weeks, in promoting my new song. So this Thursday, Careless comes out. So that's November 21st. So once that out, in the next episodes, I'm going to be having that played in the episodes at the end. And so look out for my stuff. I'll have some links in my description of the episode. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for listening and supporting this podcast. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Enjoy.